Hi, everyone. Welcome to Simi Waters Life Coaching. And today we're going to continue our series on the emotionally neglectful childhood. So if you as a child didn't have your emotional needs met, then how that can affect you in adulthood. Hold on one second. My sound isn't quite working. Let me fix that. Okay. All right, so this is part one of types of emotionally neglectful parenting. So we had really talked about earlier how emotional neglect in childhood can affect you, how it shows up in adulthood. In the second video, I gave you a list of things that could be showing up in your life now as an adult that could indicate that you had some emotional neglect when you were a child. So today, I'm actually just going to go through about half of the different ways that a parent can be emotionally neglectful to their child. Words out. I don't think I need them today. So yeah, just going through different kinds of neglect, specifically emotional neglect. So we're not going to be talking about the physical abuse or physical neglect or medical neglect or educational neglect. All those are more obvious and more easily seen and easily rectified. Emotional neglect, especially culturally, and especially in many of the African cultures, in the Nigerian culture where I am from, you see a lot of emotionally neglectful parenting is seen as normal parenting, is seen as the way to parent. And now, granted, not all parents are like this, even in Nigeria. I have plenty of examples of families that do things differently. So, but I'm just talking out of the general view of what's acceptable and not acceptable, but that can have a detrimental effect on a child. So I'm going to start by talking about attachment and how these different things will affect a child. So children, when they're born to parents, want to be loved, basically. Biologically, a child needs its parents to get its needs met. So it has to, even from the time it's born, it has to do things in a way that gets its caregivers or its parents to respond to it in a positive way. So it can get fed, it can get taken care of, and it can be protected. And this attachment, in infancy, you see it very easily in infancy. You have the newborn baby that can't do anything for itself. So it cries to get its needs met. It tells you when its diaper is wet. It tells you when it's uncomfortable or when its clothes are uncomfortable by crying. Well, that process of making a child's needs known to the parents so that they can be protected and they can be cared for continues throughout childhood. But what happens is, as the child grows, the way parents, if a parent isn't knowledgeable about attachment and how to meet a child's needs, usually by being taught by their own parents, then parents can begin to respond out of their own needs or out of their own poor emotionally neglected childhood from when they were kids. They begin to respond to their own children from that. So when you have your baby, it wants to be held by its mom. Of course, that makes the mom feel good. But when you have other circumstances that come in that interrupt that process, the child begins to say, okay, well, my parents don't love me in this situation, so I'm going to change what I do so I get love. So how a parent responds to a child when a child asks for what it wants emotionally sends a message to the child about what it needs to do to be loved. Okay, so for a baby, the baby cries and the mom comes and gives it a bottle, or breastfeeds it or picks it up and holds it. So as far as the baby is concerned, all I have to do is ask. All I have to do is cry, and somebody's going to come and take care of me, right? But now go on to age 5, right? And the little girl wants to go out and play with her friends. And so she says, hey, I want to go out and play with my friends. That's the 5-year-old's equivalent of crying. It's asking for what it wants. That 5-year-old is saying, this is what I want, right? Well, maybe the little girl that the child wants to play with outside is the daughter of another woman that the mother hates for whatever reason, right? Well, then the mother turns to the family, why would you want to go outside to play? You know, what's wrong with you? Go and sit down and read your books. And it's like, whoa, what happened here? You know, the whole dynamic has changed because of something that has nothing to do with the 5-year-old. All the 5-year-old wanted to do was ask for its needs, go outside to play, right? And then next thing, it's getting this completely harsh, angry reaction from its mother because the mother has an issue with the other kid's mother. What message does that send to the 5-year-old? 5-year-old doesn't know anything about the mother's fight with the other woman, doesn't know anything about the social norms or the social requirements. She just wanted to go out to play. Well, the message that sends to the little 5-year-old girl is, hey, you better not ask for your needs. You better not ask to go and play. You better not, when you want to go and play with somebody, when you want to go and have fun, you better not let your mom know because something bad is going to happen. Mom is going to get angry. Mom is not going to love you if you ask to go and play or if you ask for what you want. So that's just a very small example of how the attachment scenario can start to change when as kids get older. And sometimes with some people, unfortunately, that lack of attachment based on the parents' needs starts from when they're young. There's some mothers who or fathers who just never bond with their babies. You know, you hear of baby shaking syndrome, where the mother is so depressed or mentally ill or abusive that when the baby cries or, you know, for its needs, they shake the baby or they get angry at the baby or they hit the baby. So of course, it's very obvious when someone does that to a little baby that they're being neglectful and abusive. It's not so obvious as the child gets older and the parent starts to respond negatively when the child asks for something. So that's just one example of how that dynamic can kind of look innocent, like, well, the mother wanted the child to go and read her book, so of course that's a good mother, you know. But in that scenario, what we're looking at here is how does the child interpret that situation, and that interpretation that the child gets can affect that child throughout their life. So you have a little girl like that who thinks, oh, having fun is, the child can get different messages. You can get the message that having fun is bad. You can get the message that having friends is bad. You can get the message that, oh, my mother doesn't love me if I like other people, and then decide not to have other friends. You know, just you just never know. And so that's why it's good for us to examine these things in our childhood and realize that we don't have to be bound by these messages, this like subliminal, subconscious messages that we received in childhood. And of course, and as I go through the different kinds of parents, you realize that not every parent was doing it to be mean. Not every parent was doing it, you know, on purpose, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Okay, so every parent, every well-meaning good parent does the best that they can do. Okay, some parents don't try at all, but many parents do the best that they can do. But the fact that they did their best doesn't mean that their best has turned out in everything that you as an adult needed when you were a child. So don't feel guilty by saying, hey, I'm going to take some time to reevaluate my childhood messages and kind of restore some parts of myself that may be missing. All right, so with that, I'm going to start with the first, let me also define what a child needs. That emotional connection that a child needs, other than food, clothing, shelter, all that. A child needs an emotional connection with its primary caregiver. And that emotional connection looks like empathy. And empathy means the parent or the caregiver or the adult understands how the child feels in that situation. And I'm a parent, I'm telling you, it's hard. You know, when you're earning money, you're taking care of the house, you're dealing with all the issues of life, it can be very challenging to take the time to slow down and think about how your child feels in that situation. But if we don't do it, our children are not going to get the emotional connection that they need. So first, you require empathy. You have to slow down and understand, okay, in this situation, I know how I feel. How does my child feel before you proceed in doing what needs to be done? So when you look back at your childhood, ask yourself, did my parents understand how I felt in the different scenarios that happened? So if you didn't get the feeling that they understood how you truly felt, then you were emotionally neglected. And second one was, did your parents discuss your feelings? Did they, and I'm not talking about this, oh, poor Johnny, you're feeling tired, you know, not, I don't mean in a sappy, you know, over-exaggerated way. There are many ways that a parent can express that they understand how a child feels without it being fake. And I know we look at a lot of those things as being fake. And sometimes those of us who see those scenarios of discussing feelings as fake, the reason we see it as fake is because we were emotionally neglected. So we're uncomfortable when we witness a scenario where parents are being empathetic, or they're taking the time to understand what their child feels. We feel uncomfortable because we never received it. So just look back and say, did your parents ever discuss your feelings? Not just their feelings. Many parents are very good at telling you that they're angry, they're upset, or whatever, how they feel. But did they take time to include in that conversation how you felt about what was happening to you? And then also, did they provide, did they help you resolve your feelings? So when you were sad, did they provide comfort? Did they provide a perspective that could give you some resolution to your feelings? Did they tell you how to express your feelings safely? So they would give you some limits, like, okay, well, I know you're feeling really, really excited, instead of jumping on the table, why don't we go outside and run around? Or express that feeling that you have in a safe way. And then also finally, they need to give you limits, and then they need to help you resolve your feelings. And of course, it takes time. It's challenging. It's not a one-time thing. When you have a child who maybe loses a best friend, that can be very difficult for a child, especially girls, and girls, when they get to like that middle school, 11, 12, 13-year-old stage, there's a lot of drama that goes on between friends and best friends. When you were going through that, were your parents there? Did they even notice? That's another one. Did they even notice that something was going on? Were they there to help you talk through it, help you resolve it, help encourage you that things would get better, give you hope, or give you tools to navigate that period? So all of that goes into being emotionally present for a child. So when you think back at your childhood, was any of that present? Were your parents empathetic? Did they understand how you felt? Did they discuss your feelings? Were your feelings welcome at the table for discussion in a situation? Did they provide comfort? Did they provide tools? Did they provide skills for you to deal with your feelings? And then did they provide limits so that you didn't go overboard in expressing your feelings? Or did they just allow you to run all over the place with your feelings? And that's what the emotional connection or the emotional care looks like for when a parent is healthy and has the tools and is able to do it. It would look something like that. All right, so now we'll start with the first kind of scenario with parenting. And in my family circles, both my immediate family and also in cousins, just external family, we've had some of this happen. I've observed this quite a bit, where you have the self-centered parent. And this is the parent who interprets everything that happens through how they feel. So it doesn't matter how you as the child felt. All that mattered was how what was happening affected them. And so it can be, it looks something like, how do I put it? So say a child, okay, here's a good example. Let's go back to the little girl who wanted to play with her friend, right? And her mother said, why would you want to go play with your friend, over there? That's a self-centered parent, although the child in that scenario may not know it, because the mother had a fight with the other girl's mother, so doesn't want to go and play. Now let's turn that scenario around a little bit. Say the girl is a little older, maybe she's 15, and she's best friends with another little girl, another teenager, and maybe that teenager is well off, or is in a higher rank in society, or whatever, what have you. And of course, because she's friends with that other teenager, it gives the mother the access to these rich parents. And so she has these connections, she gets to network with these rich people because her daughter is friends or is in the same class with this other little girl, right? Now say the rich girl starts being mean to this lady's daughter. Okay, I may have to give them names here to keep it straight. So let's say Lola is the little girl. Okay, and then let's say Binkwe is her mother. So Binkwe is the mother, Lola is the teenager. So Lola's friend is rich, right? and gives Bimpe access to rich circles. Well, one day Lola and her friend have a falling out. Maybe the rich girl is being mean to her, and she just decides, I'm sick of this. I don't want to be friends with her, and they have a big falling out. Now, even if the falling out is justified, even if Lola feels like, well, I don't want to be with this girl anymore, it still hurts. It doesn't matter what you lose. There's always a sense of loss, because I'm sure Lola had invested maybe the whole semester making friends with this girl, and they've been best friends and they've had plans, but now they've had a falling out. So in this scenario, how do you think Lola is feeling? Number one, she's lost her best friend. Okay, so she has to find another best friend. Number one, she's lonely. Number two, she's angry, at what this girl was doing to her. Or, she feels, maybe she may feel left out. She can have all kinds of feelings going on because she had a falling out with her best friend. So she comes home and tells Bimpe, her mother, that me and my best friend, we had a falling out. I'm not friends with her, So she maybe said it angrily, and all that. But inside, she has all these feelings. She's a teenager. She's got all these mixed feelings going on. And then Bimpe is like, in her mind, instead of thinking about what her daughter needs, how her daughter is feeling, she immediately thinks about her access to, the ladies' club and the money and all that. And she immediately starts to tell Lola, how are we going to solve it? How are we going to resolve it? How are we going to, not because she's not even taking into consideration her daughter's feelings at all. She just wants to solve the problem, get the two girls back together so that she can continue with her life. That's a self-centered parent, because the child's feelings are not important. And, we all have parents like that. Well, not we all have parents like that, but there are many parents like that, and for many of them, it's not their fault. When you think about, in my culture, networking and who you know is like very important. It's almost like next to God in some circles, who you know, and taking care of the wealthy and the connected people in your circle is like a religion. And so in that scenario, you can see that children can really get lost in that mix where the networking and the connections and the worship of people who have money can affect a child's feelings. So Lola can start feeling like, okay, well, so if her mother makes her make up with this girl because of this, Lola can grow up with a sense of not being worthy, a sense of her feelings are not important. And what's important in life is placating those who have money, or placating people who are basically better than you. And she learns to stuff her feelings. And somebody like that can really grow up to be a people pleaser. Someone who just is, you see some people, they're always running around, pleasing people who have money, always sucking up to people who have money, always sucking up to people who have power. It comes from being trained as a kid, and it can be really, really harmful to a person's sense of self. That little girl can find herself in life subjecting herself really to abuse from other people if those people look like, the people that her parents told her to subject herself to abuse. And no, you can't get angry with them. Oh no, you can't reject them. No, you can't stop hanging out with them because, so that's a selfish parent who's only thinking of her own needs. Another scenario here could be that the parent doesn't recognize that their child is separate, so that the feelings that they have are separate from the feelings that the child have, or the child's achievements are different from their own achievements. So a self-centered parent, when a child comes home with a B or a D, or C, whatever the child's grade is, the feeling of woundedness in the parent that the child did not do well in school can be so much that they overreact to the child because they see themselves in the child. They do things to the child, not because they see the child as being their own person, but it's like, you are a reflection on me. Everything you do reflects on me. Well, that's not true. You're your own person as the parent, and the child is their own person. So when a parent sees what the children do as a reflection on themselves, they can respond to the child out of their own feelings. And that's self-centered because they're not really taking time to understand what's going on with the child. So the child may have a learning disability, and because of that, they may not be able to perform at school the way the parent wants. Instead of helping the child resolve that problem, and perform the best that they can perform. You may find the parent like being harsh, pushing the child, criticizing the child, isolating the child from fun activities so that the child can perform how they want them to perform, because they feel like it's a reflection on themselves. The needs of the child now become the needs of the parent, become the needs of the child. So a self-centered parent is looking at things from their perspective all the time, how they look, how this affects them. But sometimes they also think they're being well-meaning, or they were just raised in that same scenario, and in some ways they can't help but respond that way. But if you look back and you see that your parents responded to you and to things that happened to you based on how it looked to them, based on how they felt about it, without taking into consideration what was going on with you, then you may have been raised, your parents may have had some self-centeredness going on there. Okay, so let's go on to, you have your your authoritarian parents, the parents who demand respect, extreme respect. And I know in my culture that was a big deal, like, extreme respect. I mean, everything was interpreted as either being respectful or disrespectful. You couldn't have a normal range of responses to things, because if what you were doing didn't signal extreme respect, you got in trouble. You got a talking to, you got criticized and yelled at. An example would be how sometimes you have a parent who wants a child to jump up the minute they walk into the house. They want the child to jump up and come and greet them and come and do what they say very, very quickly. Or if you, I know, and we joke about these things. I know in Nigeria we joke about how if you stood wrong, your parents said that you were disrespecting them. If you looked at them wrong, if you looked them in the eye, you were disrespecting them. If you looked at the ground, you weren't paying attention to what they were saying. You just couldn't do it right. It didn't matter how you did it. And that's just because inside that parent, there was a hole of insecurity. They themselves were insecure about where they stood. And so they looked to their children, and also I'm sure to other people, to fill that hole of insecurity as to whether or not they were being respected, as to whether or not things were being done that way. So parents like this would be controlling, very critical, discipline extremely harshly, even in little things. They see any kind of deviation from their way of thinking as complete rejection and disobedience from the child. So even if you thought, oh, well, maybe I want to wear red today instead of blue, and the parent decides you should wear blue, if you even came back and said, well, I really like the red, the parent's reaction is, how dare you like the red dress when I told you the blue dress was better? So little things become signals of love and respect and rejection. And man, that can be really, really hard for a child to grow up in. So in that scenario, a child can feel like their needs don't matter, their thoughts don't matter. You find a child who grows up in a scenario like that can be very indecisive. They have no idea what they want, because when they were children, what they wanted, in order to be safe, in order to be loved, what they wanted had to be what their parents wanted. They couldn't want something else. So they have a hard time knowing what they want because they've suppressed that thinking process that tells them what they want. So you find people like that find it very hard to make decisions. In fact, they when you put them in a situation to make a decision or to express something that they like or dislike, they become very anxious because it's so easy to get it wrong. If you like the pink dress over the yellow dress, bad things can happen. I remember once there was someone came to me, not my parents, not my actual parents, but an adult in my life came. So we're all at home, and I think this person was getting ready to go somewhere. They were getting ready to go to another relative's house. Well, as a kid, I was very nerdy. All I wanted to do in my life was watch cartoons or read books. If it wasn't a cartoon, in fact, sometimes if you would come to me, sometimes you would find me in front of the TV. The TV would be on with a cartoon, and then I'd have a book open, and I'd be picking at the cartoon you know. So she was going to another relative's house, you know, and of course I didn't want to go because I was in my room. I was probably about 8, you know. I was more than happy. All my books were there. I had my encyclopedias there. You know, TV was going to come on. It was probably around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Cartoons were going to come on at 5 o'clock. So, hey, I was good. You know, we had a housemaid in the house as well. So she was going over to, you know, another relative's house. So she came to me and said, hey, do you want to go to so-and-so's house? And I was like, you know, and I didn't say disrespectfully or anything. I just said, no, I want to stay here. Oh my gosh, you would have thought, I jumped up and slapped this woman's face and cussed her out the way she responded to me. You know, because she wanted me to come. And so instead of coming to me and saying, hey, put on your shoes, we're going to this person's house, she came and asked me if I wanted to go. Well, I didn't want to go because my cartoons were coming on and I wanted to read my books. And she got so angry and yelled. I mean, you're yelling at an 8-year-old, right? And she was saying things like, you think you're better than everybody else? Like, I just want to read my books, you know? You think you're better than people, you know? When you go over there, they're nice to you and they give you food and you're so ungrateful. And I'm just like, you know, so as a little kid, and I remember that. And how you know that something affected you emotionally is when something like that, if you remember it, what am I now? You know, I'm in my 30s. I'm in my late 30s. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. So another sign that some things have affected you emotionally, I'm just going to put this as an aside, is that you remember it like it was yesterday. Something happened. Okay, you may tell yourself it wasn't a big deal. If you remember it, and it was a negative situation, it affected you emotionally and you really want to deal with that. So I remember that like yesterday. And I think at that moment, I realized that I can't say what I want to these people. And, you know, that it sent that message to me that I can't voice what I want. And I think my personal voice, my ability to ask for what I wanted, you know, probably around that period in my life started to become, you know, diminished. And so over time, I'll just never really tell people what I want. I just kind of go for what I want. If I can get it for myself, I'll get it for myself. But so I remember, so that's kind of the authoritarian thing where what the adult wants has to be what the child wants. Even if she had said, well, I don't think you should stay, we're going, I would have just gone along. But the neglect there was that the adult basically came into my brain and told me that my thinking processes were wrong. My desires were wrong. My preferences were wrong. So the problem is not that she made me go. It's her right as an adult. It's your right as an adult to say, hey, okay, well, I know you want to stay, but I think it's better for you if you come. That would have been fine. That would have been perfectly within, you know, proper caregiving for a child. But going into the child's brain and telling the child, you're ungrateful for not wanting this. You're bad for not wanting this. You're shameful. You should be ashamed of yourself for not wanting what I want. That is what actually creates a lot of emotional damage. You know, if you don't want what I want for you, then there's something wrong with you. That creates a lot of emotional damage for children. So, and I know I experienced a lot of situations where it was like, you know, adults would ask me questions and I'm like, oh Lord, I have no idea what to say to not to not get in trouble here. So those are some of the things that happen in an authoritarian, overly harsh discipline experience, not being able to see not being able to allow the child to be their own person, even as you guide them into adulthood. So an authoritarian parent has extremely high expectations. They don't allow children to question what's going on. They don't allow children to ask questions. Well, if the child is asking the question, that means that something is going on in the child's mind that needs to be expressed and resolved. That's part of that. That's part of that empathy, you know, that's required. So, you know, you have an authoritarian parent may express a desire to have an instant response for the child or from the child all the time, and so the child you start walking on eggshells. You have children who are nervous, children who are insecure. It creates a huge lack of confidence. So if you find yourself with a lack of confidence in adulthood, you may have experienced some of those things. And if you were disciplined extremely harshly, what happens as an adult in that scenario is that you begin to blame yourself for things that are not your fault. The children who are disciplined too harshly feel a lot of guilt. Anything that happens in their environment, they feel guilty. And when a person feels guilty for things that are not their fault, they become susceptible to being in abusive relationships, because an abusive person always blames their victim for what happens to them. So when a person is already carrying a load of guilt from being blamed over and over and over again when they were children, generally they usually find themselves in abusive relationships. You find women like that in relationships with men who will beat them, hurt them, criticize them, emotionally abuse them. Men like that, you find them in abusive relationships with abusive women sometimes. At work, a man like that can have like very low self-confidence, the inability to move ahead. You find them sticking with bosses who are extremely abusive and subjecting themselves and their families to that abuse. They subject themselves to continued abuse from the family system. So that harsh parenting can be really damaging, and it teaches as an adult, you may find yourself just always putting your own needs down to please other people. Causes you to become like a people pleaser. So we've covered two types of parents. We covered like the self-centered parent. We covered the overly harsh parent, and those two I know show up a lot in at least my culture. You have a lot, not that the parents are like that all of the time. And as we go down some of the other types of parenting, you'll find that most of us experience a mix of that. So the self-centered parents sometimes can also be self-centered to one child and then overly permissive to another child. So the overly permissive parent, the self-centered parent always tends to like to play their children against one another. So then you find them that they'll have favorites. So the child who seems to be doing everything the selfish parent wants gets to be the golden child, right? And gets to have everything they want, gets to be praised all the time, gets to be given a pass on the things that they want. However, at the same time that they pick one child to be the golden child, they automatically pick another child to be the scapegoat. And in subsequent videos, I'll talk about abuse. When we talk about people who seem to continually find themselves in abusive relationships, some of it comes from this family dynamic where an overly permissive parent has made one child a scapegoat. And so if you're always the scapegoat in your family, chances are you'll find yourself in abusive relationships going forward, because you're always guilty. Everything is your fault. It doesn't matter who did it. If your siblings did it, your parents assume it's your fault. If the dog did it, your parents assume it's your fault. If the sun rose in the sky at the wrong angle, your parents would assume it's your fault. So, but that's, a topic for another day, being the scapegoat. But permissive parents tend to have a self-centered parent also tends to be a permissive parent when they split their children against each other. This is the good child and this is the bad child. So I'm going to talk briefly about permissive parenting and then kind of wrap this video up, and I'll continue in the next video tomorrow. The permissive parent is also a selfish parent, because selfish parents want to be seen. They want to be seen in a good light all the time. They want things their way, but then they also want to be seen in a good light. So they want things to go their way. And if it doesn't go their way, they blame that child. But in order to blame this child, they have to be able to say, well, this child did the right thing, or this child is the good child, which makes the parent feel like, well, somebody likes me, or somebody is my friend. So whichever child tends to flatter the parent the most, make the parent feel good about themselves, gets to be the golden child. And then there are some other parents who are just permissive all across the board, because they want to be seen a certain way. And it has nothing to do with what the child needs or how the child feels. They just want to be friends with their children. They want their children to love them 100% of the time. Well, if you're a good parent, sometimes you're going to say no to your children. Sometimes your child wants something that's not good for them, and you're going to say no. And when you say no, guess what happens when you say no to people? People don't like it when you say no to them. Well, the permissive parent doesn't want to be seen as being mean or harsh or tough. So they just say yes all the time, even when the child is doing things that damage that's damaging to them, even when the child is in a situation that is harmful to the child. So you have a child who is young, you have 11, 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds who are dating seriously. Depending on the scenario, that can be dangerous for that child. That can be dangerous for that little girl's self-esteem. It can be dangerous for that boy's, sense of self-worth. It can be dangerous for their sexual health to be dating at such a young age. But, the parent enjoys the feeling of being that mom, of being that dad, the cool mom who gives their children everything they want, who is always in good terms with their kids. And because of that, they do what's harmful to their child. Or they're afraid of the strong negative emotions that can come from a child. I mean, have you ever seen a 2-year-old throwing a tantrum? I mean, that's some serious anger. Nobody wants to deal with that. Your 2-year-old throwing a tantrum in public can be very embarrassing. The child screaming its head off. And so the parent is like, well, this isn't working for me, so I'm just going to do what I need to do to get what I want out of the situation, not necessarily what the child needs. So parents like that tend to have a hard time with conflict. They themselves have a hard time disciplining themselves to do what needs to be done. So instead of sitting with the child and saying, hey, okay, no, you can't go to that party. There are going to be people who are way older than you there. I suspect there might be drugs there. So I'm not going to let you go to the party, even though all your friends are going, And then when the child expresses their displeasure or their anger or their sadness, sitting with the child and helping the child process those feelings. That's a lot of work. Number one, you had to say no. Because I've been there. Number one, you had to say no. Number two, you had to absorb all the negative feelings that the child put forward. Then number three, you have to walk the child through those feelings. Like, look, I still love you. I understand the desire to go out there and party. I've been there. I wanted to go out and party, but it's not good for you. This is not good for you. And so I'm not going to let you do it, but I still love you. And it's because I love you that I'm not letting you go and do what's not in your best interest. That's a lot of work. Sometimes you have to keep going back to the kid to have that discussion and keep going back and having that discussion till you get to the point of resolution. And the permissive parents, they just don't want to do that. They just want to sometimes they want to just hand their kids money, or they want to hand their kids off to the nanny, or they want to hand their kids off to the housemaid or the school to deal with them, because it's a lot of work to get in there with your kids and really, I guess, rumble and get into those feelings. Because kids don't make it easier on you. I'll tell you that. They do not make it easier on you when you try to be an empathetic and involved parent. So but the message that the permissive parent sends to the child, even if they're giving them tons of money and letting them do whatever they want, the message they send is that you're not worth the time it's going to take to deal with this for you, or you're not valuable enough for me to try to protect you. You're not valuable enough for me to take the time to teach you right from wrong. You're not valuable enough for me to really sit with you and deal with this, for you. So a child like that in adulthood will probably struggle with low self-esteem. They may have everything on the outside, but they may struggle with low self-esteem. They may not feel like they're worthy of an investment of teaching or mentoring from someone else. They may not be able to discipline themselves to do what is right. They may not be able to really focus on work or work hard. Like, that work ethic may not be there. They may not be able to face up to conflict because nobody ever sat with them and really, showed them how to do conflict properly. They may end up having some avoidance issues. So that's kind of like permissive parenting. And I know this is a lot for one video. I'm going to stop here. But there's so many ways that, and the truth is, even as I talk about it, I realize, man, even as I grew up, even as I became an adult and I started parenting, because I didn't get any of this, I didn't even realize that it was necessary. By the time I, became a parent, all of this stuff was kind of not even a part of a life. The way I was raised was, okay, you were fed, clothed, you got an education. If you got an education and you got a job and you had money in the bank and your needs were taken care of, that was what life was about. So all these other feelings were just stuffed away. They weren't something that, I learned to look at and really say, okay, what am I feeling here? What's my child feeling here? What's going on? And it's a lot later that I've been able to learn about it. As I worked on becoming a better parent, I started realizing there's all this other stuff going on. There are all these feelings, all this chaos, and I started dealing with it, one by one. So if you've grown up without any of this, don't be overwhelmed by just how much it seems to be. You kind of have to take it one step at a time. You have to start with yourself, because unless you resolve your own feelings, you can't help your children resolve their feelings. So it's better to take a step back and kind of go back to your childhood and what happened with you. And as you make a list and go through those things, you'll begin to see what you're doing with your children. And it will still take time and effort. You have to learn new habits of parenting, but it can be done. And it's really never too late. Someone told me, we don't lose our relationship with our children when they leave home. We really have a lifetime to continue to grow and to continue to relate with our children in more and more healthy ways. So don't feel a whole ton of despair if, as you're trying to examine your childhood, you see these things in yourself as well. As you overcome your childhood and the emotional neglect that you received, you'll become a better parent. You'll see more clearly what you're doing, and you can start making those corrections. But it really starts with you. You have to start with understanding what's going on in your mind and in your consciousness and in your heart to be able to make a difference for your kids. So thanks for joining me today. I'm going to pick up going through the different types of emotional neglect with examples. Same time, I'll probably do the hangout a little earlier tomorrow, maybe a couple of hours earlier. And we'll keep going. I thought this was just going to be 2 parts, but it might end up being 3 or 4 parts to cover all the types of emotional neglect. Thanks for joining me. Have a good day.